Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today's video is going to be a ranking of all of the eyeshadow palettes I tried in 2023. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This video is the one where I'm going to be ranking all of the eyeshadow palettes I've tried so far in 2023. We're at the halfway point. I've tried 37 new to me eyeshadow palettes that I've reviewed already for you in the past couple of months. But of course we now need to ask ourselves which ones are best, and then hopefully I can do another one of these towards the end of the year and then do a giant roundup of all of the eyeshadow palettes I've tried come January. That's sort of the plan. So yeah, I've tried 37 eyeshadow palettes so far, so let me get to it. But before we get to it, it may be good to know that I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, and this greatly influences how I like doing my makeup and what I like about makeup in the first place. I've also been reviewing makeup for more than a decade, so if I say something is a favorite, it's a favorite, as you will find out later today. I love myself an eyeshadow palette, I love Essence and Catrice, and I love getting the use out of my makeup. So if that's something you're into and you feel the same way, then maybe this channel has something to offer for you. So I hope you would like to consider subscribing by clicking the button down below and joining my Snow Angel family. So yes, 37 eyeshadow palettes. To some people that may seem like a lot, to other people that may seem like not so much. In previous years, there would be roughly 60 to 80 palettes in like the first half of the year, and very often I hadn't even tried them yet. So last year I also did a ranking video, but it was more like a prediction video of things that I had bought within the year and that I was hoping I would like, but I didn't know yet because I hadn't tried it. However, in the past year, I've definitely slowed down how many palettes I buy. There are some months where I have a few palettes coming in, and there are months where I buy nothing at all, and then I just group them into sections of roughly 5 palettes at a time, and I review them that way. The reason why we have 37 here today is because I had a little overflow left from 2022, but I did review them by now. So really, I tried them sometimes already at the end of 2022, but I hadn't gotten around to reviewing them yet, just in time for the new year. So that's why there's a bit more here. Yeah, 37 palettes. Let's get started. And the first two I need to mention in this ranking, so numbers 37 and 36, I don't have with me here because they are either in different parts of my collection, they are no longer part of my actual collection, or they have been decluttered completely because I didn't like them all that much. And it's two releases that Essence and Catrice did in the spring season. So I would say the Essence Marrakesh palette, I'll pop a picture up on the screen so you can see what it looks like. This palette was okay. It was pretty decent. None of these are bad palettes, by the way, if that wasn't clear yet. I love all of these, but I have too much eyeshadow palette, like too much eyeshadow as it is. So I need to be selective in what I truly like and what I don't like. And the Essence Marrakesh, even though it had a pretty good formula, it wasn't purple enough for me. It was like warm tone neutrals with a pop of purple. And I think we've seen a little bit too much of it, so it wasn't unique enough for my collection to hang on to, which is why I decluttered it this spring, because I had already tried it by the time I filmed my declutters. And so I was like, you know what? I can get rid of this one. I've tried it. It's okay. I think that if you were to buy this and this is not something you already have, that you might like it, but I have too many of these kind of palettes already in my personal collection, which is why I didn't keep it around. Number 36 is going to be the Catrice Blushing Ocean palette. Again, I'll pop a picture up on the screen so you can see what it looks like. I still have this floating around my home somewhere because I have all of the Pro Slim palettes that Catrice does. So I have the full set. It's just that most of the color stories don't really appeal to me. So I keep the full set so I can film videos with it, because I'm not sure whether we're gonna get any more of these though. So maybe by my next declutter I might be able to get rid of some of these if they're not releasing any more of these. But I do want to do an overview video in August when I do eyeshadow palette month every year on this channel. I do an eyeshadow palette related month in August, and every video I do is eyeshadow palette or eyeshadow related. I think I want to do a video about one and done shadows as well this year, which is technically not going to necessarily just be palettes, of course. So I might rope some of my singles into it this year. Because I've been really into single eyeshadow more so than eyeshadow palettes. But yeah, this Catrice line has been going on for a while, so I own all of them, which is why I have the Blushing Ocean still lying around. But this just wasn't really my color story, these pinky tones with the blue. To my surprise, it worked really well. From a formula point of view, it's a pretty decent palette for what you pay for. I mean, if you compare the price to what you actually get, I mean. So it's a good palette for sure, but it wasn't really my color story. Moving on then to palettes that I do have. Number 35, the Makeup Revolution Zodiac Air palette. This was not good. I hadn't tried it yet when I filmed my declutter, so that's why I decided to keep it around at the time, but I've now used it for my full face of Makeup Revolution, but I only used one shade, and then I did review it and used all of the shades in May. I'll make sure to link you to any of the eyeshadow palettes reviews I've done in this past year, so you can have a look at all of the swatches and all of the looks I've done, because I always insert them into my eyeshadow palette review videos. Plus, what I also tend to do is that I cut up those videos into sections, so there are going to be chapters in every video. So if you're interested in just one palette, you can just watch the part of the video that you want to watch. You don't have to sit through the whole thing. So I hope that's helpful, which is why you're not getting swatches in this video, because I have them all up in those other videos. So if you're interested in anything in particular, then that's what you can do. This wasn't great. It was very sheer. It looks really lovely in the pan. Like, looking at this color story, you're gonna think I'm gonna love it, but the quality just wasn't quite there. But color story wise, this definitely pulls on my heartstrings. So this entire bottom section is very much made up of palettes that I tried, that I'd hoped to love, but that didn't quite deliver what I was hoping it. So in a way they were disappointing, even though these are still really good palettes, I think. The Adept Cosmetics Minka palette was definitely one. I bought this at the end of 2022, tried it at the start of this year, and I was just disappointed because this formula is very different from the Ninhydrin and the Plain Jane that I tried in the past. This is a very creamy, flaky formula that is very difficult to pick up with a brush, and because you get so many shimmers, these I feel are just really incredibly difficult to work with for that reason. They very much remind me of the Patrick Ta shimmers that you get in the Major Dimension palettes, and those are also not my favorite because you really can only use them with fingers and they don't blend. So with this, in order to get more use out of the palette, I would need more mattes. There are way too many shimmers in this very foily formula, which looks stunning on the eyes. But this is more of like a one and done eyeshadow palette with like lots of single use shadows that you need to put in with other mattes, and then it works, and that's just a bit too limiting for what I am looking for when it comes to an eyeshadow palette. 33 and 32 go to the Odin's Eye limited edition collection that was brought out also in the fall time. This was their holiday release for 2022, the Christmas Eve and the Merry Christmas palette. Now I'm gonna be ranking this one a little bit lower, so this is number 33. And I didn't love the formula in these, you guys. I love the color stories. These are stunning color stories. And I actually did buy myself one of the new Odin's Eye releases. It's going to be shown in my upcoming haul, which I'll show you next week. So that you can see it then, just to give the formula another chance. Because I have tried Odin's Eye palettes in the past that I feel are much better than this. So I felt the Odin's Eye formula is perhaps a little bit inconsistent, even though I really do enjoy the colors we get in here, which is why they are still around, and I do really appreciate these. I mean, in terms of color story, it was one of the best releases we got in 2022, and I'm happy to own them. And then in 32, I'm going to be ranking the Christmas Eve palette even more up my street. It's got a couple of weird shades, but there was just something about the formula in both of these where some of the mattes were a little bit patchy, the shimmers were a little bit too sheer, and they were difficult to build up. So from a formula standpoint, I just wanted more. And finally, in the 30s, we get number 31, and it's this little Kaja bento box in the shade Rosewater. I just tried this out in June because I'm trying out a bunch of K-Beauty eyeshadow palettes at the moment because I really wanted to see what K-Beauty had to offer. And this is stunning. It's a really, really pretty color story with these like cooler tone pink tones and this really gorgeous plum. It makes for a gorgeous shimmering eye look. I loved it for sure. But in terms of what it can do, because we just get 3 shades, it's a little bit limiting and I wasn't wowed by the formula as well. This is one of the more expensive bits that I tried from a K-Beauty brand now, or at least I bought it through YESSTYLE. Is Kaja K-Beauty? I don't even know for sure. But this was just a little bit too limiting in what it can do, and I just like to get some versatility out of my palettes for sure. Next up is the section from 30 to 21, and in the 30th spot, I'm going to be ranking the Kiko holiday release that they did in 2022. This is the Bright Dream eyeshadow palette in Green as Hope, and this is stunning, but like the Kaja, a little bit limiting for what it can do. I like the 2 greens at the bottom for sure, but this matte cream, if that would have been a very light green shimmer, would have loved it a lot better, and I don't understand the gold. People keep requesting I try Kiko eyeshadow palettes, but their color stories are just not that exciting usually. They can do good quality eyeshadow for sure, but the way they put color stories together is just not my favorite. So this is now my one and only Kiko eyeshadow palette because I do like it enough, but it is very limiting in what you can actually do with it. It does look cute though. It's a nice little Christmas ornament. Another palette that was a little bit disappointing to me, I'm going to be ranking in number 29 spot, and it's the Viseart Petite Cool Mattes. Now, don't get me wrong, I've tried a lot of Viseart. In fact, when I did the April review, I only had Viseart eyeshadow palettes in that one, and this is my least favorite one I tried this year. I love the Viseart formula. These are some of the best mattes you're ever going to find in any formula, but color story-wise, this is lacking, and it's a cool tone palette, so I had not expected that. I didn't see it coming, but everything is very, very gray toned. So whether I'm using the grays or the blues, I feel there wasn't a lot of contrast on my eyes, and when I intended to do the blue look, it looked gray on me. So for me, it's really only the purpley tones and the neutrals that really stand out to me, but these 2 sections in the middle, I'm like, could have perhaps done without it, or perhaps if the grays had been taupes, I might have liked it even better. It's of course also an all matte palette, which is never my favorite because I prefer to have shimmers. I can definitely make this work. I definitely bought it to be a complementary palette to some of the Viseart things I have because I don't feel I always get the mattes in all of the palettes that I would like to have. And I can very much mix and match this. Viseart does have removable pans, so in the future, maybe at some point in time, if I get a bit bored with my Viseart palettes, I have a bunch of the mini palettes that have this smaller sized pan, and I might be able to mix and match it and pull them apart and create new palettes with it. So that's definitely why I got this one. So it definitely serves a purpose in my makeup collection, but from what it can do as a standalone palette, it's ranked quite low. In the number 28 spot, we're going to get the Nomad Verona palette. Only tried it again this month, but I didn't love this one. And the reason why I didn't love it is because it's got too many mattes. In a way, and also the shimmer formula I didn't love. So the Verona palette looks like this. It's got this little door thing that flaps open, and then you get the palette like this. The pinks are incredibly bright, not necessarily my cup of tea. I definitely bought it for the grungy side, and especially these purples have my heart. I can definitely see myself going back to this, but I'm probably only going to ever recreate one of the looks I did with like the grungier shades. Maybe pulling in a little bit of this, but not necessarily. You get shimmers in every single quad, but the shimmers in here are very thin and they need a lot of building up for them to really have an impact, which is why I didn't love this as much, even though I really appreciate the color story. I love the concept. I love the design of the palette. It's got a lot going for it. It definitely pulls you in, and it definitely pulled me in, which is why I bought it. But it's not necessarily my favorite. Another thing that I've only tried this month is the K-Beauty 3CE eyeshadow palette in the shade Plot Twist. This is another one where I had expected something differently before trying it, and that has to do with the color story. This looked online like it was going to be green, and then I got it home and it was warm tone browns. Are they stunning warm tone browns? For sure. Are they mustardy warm tone browns, which I feel out of warm tone browns as a spectrum works the best on me? For sure. But I just wanted a bit more, and for a 9 pan, I mean, we get so many overlapping shades that I'm like, I just want a little bit more. Like these two shimmers on the edges are just a bit too similar. These two browns are pretty much identical. So why was this a 9 pan? This could have been a 5 or a 6 pan, and I would have been happy. More Viseart. In the number 27 spot, we have the Viseart London Étoile, and this was a surprise to me. I also have the Paris Étoile and the San Francisco. The San Francisco you'll see coming up in a minute. But this one I thought I was going to like more than the San Francisco, and I ended up liking that a little bit more. It's quite warm toned, which is the only gripe I have with it, but it is really stunning eyeshadow, and it's a very stunning formula. I don't love the yellow tone gold, but I love that green. I love these two like plummy purples. This is a really good shade as well. It's got a really good array, but it's quite dark on me, and I just know come fall time, I'll go for these things again, but right now I wouldn't reach for this. So this is not universal for me year round. It's got some really stunning shades. Again, if I mix and match this with some of the mattes from the cool neutrals, or the cool mattes I should say, I think it can be really stunning, and I can tone it down a little bit perhaps, pull in some other shimmers, and I'm sure it's going to be stunning. But this is not necessarily something I'm going to go back to, even though it's perfect for travel. So I may want to chuck it into a makeup bag on some of my upcoming travels that I have planned this year. Another Nomad palette. I keep the boxes for these because I love how you can get, like with this one with the cutouts, I just love it. This is the Monteverdi Cloud Forest, and this I actually won in a giveaway because I was nominated by one of you. Very lovely, thank you again. And they made me pick out one of their palettes for free, and I picked this one because it was the one I hadn't tried yet. And this is stunning. It's a really nice, bright, colorful eyeshadow palette, but I'm not really currently into very bright eyeshadow, so that's what sets this off. And also here again, I felt the shimmers were a bit more difficult to work with. They needed a lot of building up. But is this a stunning palette? Oh yeah, for sure. And I definitely, this pulls me in more than the Verona palette does. Even though that's more my shades than this is, I just love the amount of greens we get in here. It's a very green heavy palette. We get a multi-chrome in here. It definitely has some really fun pops of color that I don't have in other palettes in my collection, even though I have plenty of colorful eyeshadow. So this definitely offers something differently, which is why it doesn't get ranked super duper low, but it's also not my top favorite. I've lost count, but I'm guessing this is 24? 24, 23, 22, 21. I think this is number 24. This is the Holika Mood. My Fave Mood eye palette in Neat Knit. This is a really stunning little neutral palette, but again, like the 3CE palette, it's very samey, but I love this from a formula standpoint. It's really lovely creamy textures. We only get one real shimmer in here. We get something that's a bit satin. So is it a lovely eyeshadow palette? For sure, but I do feel that I wanted a little bit more from it. This is great for every day for sure, but color story wise, I definitely have tried other things this year that I like better. Remember I said I also have the San Francisco Étoile. Here it is. It's got the stunning packaging as well. This one I liked a little bit better to my surprise because it's got that orange, which I knew I wasn't going to like. But if we leave out the orange, it's a neutral palette with a pop of teal, and this taupe shimmer is life. So it turns out it has a lot of my favorite shades in here. The orange I will probably never go back to, but maybe if I were to put like cocky green from the London in place of this, I may have to do that soon. I'm just thinking of that right now, that I could very easily do that and then make this even more perfect. But yeah, it's just the one shade that I don't love. Really stunning formula, great little eyeshadow palette. I'm really happy I have this. Again, great for travel. Number 22, the Peripera Fallen Acorn eyeshadow palette. This is really stunning. I like it better than the 3CE and the Holika because this just has a little bit more going for it. You can do very neutral looks with it. You can deepen it up and glam it up a little bit. Not too much though. With a K-Beauty palette, you're never going to get super high contrast because that's not the aesthetic that is like part of the whole makeup deal there. We do get a weird putty shade in here, and that sets it back just a touch because I hadn't expected that. It wasn't until I started using it that I was like, oh, we get an actual cream in here. And I don't like mixing creams and powders, so that's a bit of a pet peeve perhaps, but yeah, still a really stunning palette. I really enjoyed the color story here. Very good neutral eyeshadow palette. It's just also weirdly thick. Why is that lid so thick? Because it's the lid that makes this palette like a good couple of inches thick. The bottom is far thinner. Oh well. And then in place number 21 is another palette that I feel I want more from, but again, I bought this more so as a complementary eyeshadow palette, more so than it really being an eyeshadow palette I want to use by itself. It's the Viseart Lavande. This had been on my wish list for such a long time. I love my Violette Étendue, but sometimes I feel it's not purple enough. And this has all the cool tone purples I could possibly want. It's nice and light. It's got a very nice vibrant purple in here. It just has the one shimmer though. So I would pull in some of the shimmers from the Viseart Violette Étendue if I were to ever go back to this, because these mattes complement the Violette Étendue so perfectly, and that's one of my favorite palettes of all time. So I knew that that way I can even get more use out of that very favorite palette already. And this one is just a nice complementary palette. Again, removable pans, so I could actually physically put these into the Violette Étendue and make a new palette if I ever want to. For now, I like my color stories for the Viseart palettes as they are, but maybe next year, sometime in the future, I might do a complete Viseart switcheroo like I did with my Natasha Denona palettes this year, but at the moment I don't really feel like doing that. Are you ready for the top 20? Because I have the next batch of eyeshadow palettes. Number 20, the Vive Cosmetics 90s palette. A lot of people were asking me where it was in a recent video. I still have it. I liked it well enough, but here I felt the shimmers were a bit lackluster as well, but color story wise, such a good cool tone palette. It just is. This is a lovely cool tone color story. It's a bit darker though than what you might expect. A lot of these shades pulled a lot darker on me than what I thought it was going to when I looked at it in the pan. But just color story wise, I just love looking at this thing. I just wished the shimmers were as good as the mattes in this one. Then a couple of pleasant surprises that I tried this year. The Melt Cosmetics Gemini 2 was sent to me by a lovely subscriber because they had a double. And I was like, sure, I'll try it. This is one I skipped out on because the color story just didn't really quite seem up my street. But then I tried it and I was like, ooh, I'm so glad I now got to try it, mainly for the greens. I'm not gonna lie. If I ever go back to this palette, it will just be for the greens. I don't love the peachy shades, and I don't love that we get, what, 2 shimmers? Just 2 shimmers. So I'm very glad I didn't spend my own money on it, but from a color story perspective, I just thought this was a lot more flattering on than I had expected. With my cooler undertone, these shades can be very hit or miss, but there's just something about Melt with their pinks and their reds. I feel I can get away with it quite well. So it really depends on how pinks and reds are blended and how you pair it, because even though it may not seem like it, if you put the greens with some of those peachy pinky reds, it's going to look stunning and very sort of like you're wearing a botanical garden on your eyes. That's how I felt when I was wearing it, and I was very pleasantly surprised by it. Similar thing, the Sweet Indulgence from Sydney Grace in the number 18 spot is... I'm so glad I got to try this. Again, a gift from a subscriber. I didn't buy this myself, and this just doesn't look like it's gonna work for me. But once on the eyes... And I think that it may be the fact that it's got pink packaging that throws me off. I'm not entirely sure, but I definitely think because of that peachy pink background, these shades really look extra rosy and peachy, whereas once they're on the eyes, they look very neutral. They're sort of like really in between a pink and a red, you could say. So they're not too peachy. They're a bit more coral leaning, perhaps. I love that mustard shade in the middle and that teal as well. That purple shimmer is lovely. We get enough things to deepen things up with. Overall, it's a very well-rounded color story, and I really enjoyed it. Number 17 is the Dancing in the Sky palette from Gloss Gods. I got to try Gloss Gods for the first time this year. They have a new palette out, but it's a bit expensive, so I don't think I'll be buying it. But the Dancing in the Sky is one of their old shimmer palettes, and they now have one out that looks, it's something like Rain something, and it's like 70 euros, but it's got nothing but multi-chromes in. So very tempting because I love the Gloss Gods shimmer formula. I know that from trying this one, but do I need both? I don't think I do, but this is lovely. It's limiting though in what it can do because it is all shimmer. I did pull 2 or 3 looks out of it when I reviewed it. It's a stunning palette, still for sale as far as I know, and it's an all green shimmer palette. What's not to love? Number 16, the Peripera from Glam Shop. Glam Shop is a brand I tried, I think for the first time last year or the year before that, fell in love, and they came out with an all periwinkle palette. So of course I had to try it. It's a bit of a one-trick pony, not all of the shades go together again, like the Gloss Gods, not very versatile, but I love these shades. I mean, the Gloss Gods formula, again, if you've never tried it and you want a good shimmer, these are the kind of shimmers that I was hoping the Minka palette from Adept to have, and then it didn't. Because even though this looks extremely flaky, you can still work with it. It blends together beautifully. We get enough mattes to play around with it, but this is very blue tone. Then we get some things that are a bit more purple, so the things don't really go together in here, so it's not necessarily a standalone palette. But I was able to pick up their Fioletti palette, which is their purple palette, on sale a few weeks ago, and I think they can make a nice complementary little thing for sure. So the Peripera is definitely one that I rate very highly, not a standalone palette though. Number 15, the Moonfall palette from Shroud. Stunning formula. Don't love how these palettes, how the shades play together once they go onto the eyes. I've said this before about other Shroud palettes that I've tried, where I feel I'm very limited in what I can do, because this green can only go with that shimmer, this shade can only go with that, this shade can only go with that, this shade can only go with that, and then we get a very nice dark navy in the middle that could go with all of those things. But I just want palettes where I can mix and match any matte with any shimmer and it looks good. And with this, because this has a very green undertone, it doesn't really go with the teal. This is too blue to go with, like, this is too, it's got a very murky undertone, and this has a level of brightness. So I wanted more from it. I wanted it to be more mixy and matchy and lovely that way. Is it a stunning formula? Yes, definitely. Mattes are amazing, shimmers are amazing. But nothing in here is truly special. It's just mattes and metallics, and I just wanted a little bit more from it, but it's a stunning palette nonetheless. And this ranking spot actually surprised me. ColourPop's Troublemaker in spot number 14. Who am I? But I was looking at everything I've tried. I'm like, yeah, I did kind of like fell in love with ColourPop once again. After trying this, this is the only ColourPop eyeshadow palette I bought in 2022 because I felt so disappointed with a lot of the eyeshadow palettes I had tried in recent years from ColourPop. I was like, it's so hit and miss, it's not worth it. You know what? This color story really appeals to me. I'm just gonna give it a whirl and see if I feel I like it, and then I actually did buy myself some more ColourPop because I was like, I like this. It has stunning shades. It's again one that pulls like the Vive a little bit differently once on the eyes, I feel, than what you get in the pan. But very workable shadows, a lovely cool toned 90s inspired grungy color story that is a great neutral that you can glam up and deepen up to your heart's content, but it also has enough lighter neutral shades that you can do a very easy eye for the daytime as well. Very versatile palette. Can't fault it. The Rogue palette I really enjoyed as well. This is in spot number 13. This is by Fantasy Cosmetica, and this did what I wanted the Moonfall to do. So here I feel we get some more shades that that just go together a bit better. I do feel that this mint is a bit out of place because it doesn't really, it's like too blue for the green and it's too green for the teal. Yet it's the only very light shade that we get to be able to blend anything out with. That's the only thing that's a bit of a miss for me. But in terms of mattes combining with the shimmers, And all of these shimmers are at least duochromes, if not multi-chromes. This is a stunning palette. I just wish we didn't get a black in here, but that it would have had a different, deeper shade. Then it would have been perfect. So the mint should have been just a slightly different blend in the undertone, and then not a matte black, but something different. Maybe like a really deep purple, like, because the purple shades don't really get anything to deepen things up with, save for that teal. But if this had been a very deep purple, I would have liked it a lot better than it being a black. So again, not perfect, which is why it's not in the top 10, but I very much enjoyed playing around with this palette. Greens, teals, purples, blues, those are my favorite shades to work with, which is why I wanted to try this one, and it didn't disappoint. Another very pleasant surprise, I did a full face of e.l.f. in February, and I tried this for the first time, and I was like, everybody's sleeping on this. It was limited edition for Christmas, so you can no longer buy it. The only place where I was able to find swatches of this even was on Reddit. Not a single person in the beauty community has been talking about this style of e.l.f. palette. Perhaps because it looks a lot like the palettes that e.l.f. used to do in the past, that perhaps by today's standard are not that interesting anymore. However, I think there is a new one out in this sort of setup that I know Andrea Mattiliano has reviewed, and she loved it. So I hope it's the same formula as this one. So if you want to try the formula, there is a palette that seems to have a similar formula out there for sure, just not this color story. This is the Celestial Winter. I don't love these two warm tones, but other than that, it's cool toned heaven. It's got blues, purples, a bit of like a turquoisey green kind of thing. It's got a duochrome. e.l.f. is doing duochromes now? I know. This was stunning. It's a really good eyeshadow palette that has blendable mattes, easy to use shimmers. Yes, it needs a bit more building up than something like the Fantasy Cosmetica Rogue palette. I mean, you're not going to get that level of intensity, but for the price point, I was super happy with this, and it has some really stunning shades, so I knew I had to rank it pretty high. And just outside of the top 10, Gloss God's New Neutrals Remixed. This is stunning. This is by now one of my favorite neutral eyeshadow palettes that I've tried in years. And it's a true neutral palette. This is the Nabla side by side on steroids, because we get a lot of dimensional shimmers that even pull multi-chrome. You can see a little bit here that it pulls green, this one. And that's just what I love. This entire bottom row is like cooler tone, taupey, greeny browns, you could say. It's got a bit of everything, which I love. Then the middle row is a bit more warm toned, and this top row is a bit more true neutrals. But this is pretty much like a rose gold or a taupe, depending on how you blend it. Everything here has a lovely undertone. We get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mattes, and everything else is shimmer, so more shimmers than mattes, which is my preference. It goes deep enough, it goes light enough, it gives you a little bit of everything, plus you get a bunch of very interesting shades, and even something as red as this, which I didn't think I was gonna like, it worked really well on me. So this is definitely one of my new favorite neutral palettes. It's just outside of the top 10, because I had a couple of other things I just like better, but there is another Gloss Gods palette in my top 10. Time for the top 10, and in the number 10 place is a eyeshadow palette I just tried this month because I loved it so much. It's by Nomad, which is a K-beauty brand. This is their Dreamy Lilac Garden eyeshadow palette. I have another one of these to try out for you. The Peony palette, I believe it's called. This is stunning. It doesn't have as many shimmers as I'd like, but we do get 3 shimmers in here, which is lovely. I did looks with each row. It goes deep enough for a K-beauty palette. We definitely get a bit more contrast than in most. There aren't any repeat shades. We get a lovely, very soft pinky shade in here. We've got some mauve tones. We get a bit of warmth, but not too much. And this is really stunning, especially this shade here. This is not as impactful as something like the Fantasy Cosmetica for sure. I don't always want that for my everyday life. I love how easy this is to use. The mattes. If you love your mattes, K-beauty is where it's at, you guys. I don't care. This is better than many of the high-end and luxury brands I've tried in recent years. It's that good, especially in the matte department. So if you love your mattes, this one. Number 9, the Natasha Denona Retro Glam. This I tried at the start of the year. By now, it looks differently from what you might think it does because I reorganized all of my midi-sized Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes this year because I was like, you know what, Natasha, I love your formula, but I don't love your color stories. So I turned mine into cool tone neutrals with a pop of green. And this works for me a lot better than what it used to look like. Used to have pinks. It had a couple of the grayish, like something like this, I'm sure, was in there already. And like something like this matte, I believe, was already in the Retro Glam. But I definitely pulled shades from like the original Glam palette and some other palettes to go in here to make it more cool toned and a bit more perfect for me. So I did change this color story, but I love the Natasha Denona formula, which is why it gets to go into the top 10. I think if I kept it in the original state, it was my favorite Natasha Denona color story to begin with that she's come out with. I mean, I think Retro Glam was the palette that everybody wanted from Natasha Denona for a long time, myself included. So I do really enjoy the original color story as well, but when it comes to Natasha Denona, I have found out everything is very like mid-level in terms of saturation, and you don't get a lot of deep shades. So that's another reason why I reorganized the color stories, just to have more versatility and be able to get more use out of them. Number 8, the Glam Shop Cashmere. It had to go somewhere. And in terms of like a neutral color story that I've tried this year, I just think this is really, really good. Like the new neutrals from Gloss Gods could have gone into this spot for sure. I mean, they kind of work in my brain interchangeably. The Gloss Gods has more special shades, which I'm not sure if that's everyone's cup of tea. And I think that if you're just looking for a good neutral tone palette, and you want it to be able to do everything with interesting shimmers, but not have it to be like difficult to the point where you cannot play with it. I think with the Gloss Gods, you need a bit more brain space for it to work. This is foolproof every time. It's light, but we do get a little bit of depth. We get a lot of light shades to make this very wearable and easy to use. And then we get those lovely shimmers that I've just come to love Glam Shop for. So if you want a really nice, impactful, neutral eyeshadow palette that is perfect for fair-skinned people, I would recommend the Cashmere. Number 7. Moonlit Seduction Pat McGrath. I love myself a mothership from Pat McGrath. However, you will have seen that I've now decluttered some of my motherships because I was like, I've bought later ones and I like those better for me than I do the ones that I bought originally. So I've actually pulled my Divine Rose apart and I've repressed some of those shades into singles, and I've decluttered this Divine Rose 2. And this is the reason why I decluttered my Divine Rose 1. This is what I wanted the original Divine Rose 1 to be, people. It doesn't have that much warmth. The Divine Rose 1 is very warm, heavy, and quite, like, it just wasn't quite right. This is a lot more cooler tones, especially here. The only shade I don't love in here is that sort of golden tone we get. But this is a really lovely, like, peachy rose tone. We get something that's a bit more plum. We get a really good cool tone neutral brown. The champagne in here has a bit of a white cool tone cast, which I love. We get 2 really stunning, like more impactful shimmers in here. This duochrome is like a blue, like a purple to blue. And then this looks like a straight up gold, but once on the lids, it just looks stunning. So this is what I wanted Divine Rose 1 to be. So that's why this is what got to stay. And that's why it's in my top 10. It just is. I'm terribly sorry. We have all the bougie options in the top 10, it seems. Number 6, Petit Four Violetta from Viseart. I told you I had more Viseart that I had tried, and in terms of color story, this is definitely something a bit more unusual with Viseart. I feel they always play it very safe, and they go for very easy to go-to options, but this, with like the burgundy shades, and then these like grungy, grayish, like this is again that duochrome. It's a bit similar to what we get in the Pat McGrath actually. That purple to blue, like this oil slick. And then that grayish blue, so grungy, so lovely. I really enjoyed it. I don't know, however, though, how often I'm going to use it because of that color story. But it's got the crazy good Viseart formula for sure. And it's definitely something more unique from the brand. So I have this. Number 5. my final Viseart palette, the Petit Four Lilac 2. And I have the original Lilas, so I know that these can complement each other very well. We do get a bit of a warm tone in here, so that's not my favorite, but these three, stunning. And these are just my shades, you know, taupey, mauvey tones. I shout it from the rooftops every time I do an eyeshadow palette video, and this is just, it's just heaven. It's got good shimmers, good mattes. I love this. This is great for every day. Again, if I were to travel, this, maybe I can pull that bronze tone out of it, take one of the shades from the Lilas in this one, and take it with me on vacation, and I'm good to go. Number 4, Victoria Beckham. The Smoky Eye Brick in Tuxedo. That's what this thing is called. This was sent to me in PR, and I love it. This is some of the most blendable eyeshadow I've ever used. Like, this is some of the easiest to work with, especially that darker taupe. I just whack this into my crease, and that's it. That's all I need. And then I just put a shimmer all over the lid. This works beautifully together with some of their lit lusters, but it also works great with other one and done shadows. This is such a great basic eyeshadow palette to just build up a look. Yes, it's all matte. I don't love how the cream shade is bigger than the others. I also don't love that there are no dividers between the shades. I mean, from a blending standpoint, I do think that makes sense because you can now very easily mix the black with the gray and create a custom deeper shade. But this is essentially one pan with 4 colors pressed inside it. If it ever breaks, I'm going to be very sad because you will not be able to salvage that. And for how expensive this is, just the thought alone. But yeah, the taupe in here is lovely. I love how we get these shades blended together. Very easy to mix and match, and this is some of the best formula eyeshadow I've tried in a long time. But just because it's a little bit more versatile, my Lisa Eldridge Vega palette is the number 3 spot. Same lovely formula as the Victoria Beckham. If you want eyeshadow that blends itself, is easy to use, foolproof, this. And of course, I went with the cool toned color story when these launched. There are more on my wish list. Now that I've tried this, and I know how much I love it, I'd love to get Myth and Sorcery, but they have been out of stock for a while. So I don't know when these are going to come back, but I love these. I love the matte taupes in here. It's got a pop of blue just to break things up. I love how we get different textures in here. So much thought has been put in how this palette comes together. It's massive. This is, again, something you can just play with every single day, and you're gonna love it. I know not everybody loves the packaging, but here again, we get the little things, like the little things you can stick a pin into, and these are actually removable pans, so you can just buy one of these and then buy individual shades if that's what you want, if you don't want to buy the actual palette every single time. But I love this. It looks like a vintage compact, and I really enjoy the look of that. Number 2, I promised more Gloss Goths, the Smoke and Mirrors. This was sadly a limited edition collection, but it's one of the best cool tone color stories I've ever tried. It's cool tone, but without it just being grays, which I like. We do get a lot of gray in the bottom row, but I really thought they were very pretty. They had a really good undertone for me. This is a really stunning bronzy taupe, really pretty too. These cooler tone mauves, stunning. And then the entire top row are just really good neutral basics that you just want from every palette. This is a duochrome. I mean, here's Gloss Goths again with an amazing shimmer formula that does something differently. And I just really enjoyed it. I like this even better than a New Neutrals. So I'm terribly sorry that this is no longer available. I hope they bring it back for like the fall or winter season. That would be good if they could do that. I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen. But yeah, the Smoke and Mirrors by Gloss Goths. I bought it on a whim because I hadn't even tried the other two yet. But because they had a 25% off deal that day, I just decided to pop it into my shopping bag and buy it from them. And I love it. And my top favorite palette, I'm not sure if anybody saw this one coming. Catrice, 5 in a box, diamond level look. Yes. One of the most affordable things I've tried all year gets the top spot so far. Why? Because it's simply that good. I know not everybody likes this. Is it incredibly light? Yes. Does it have a lot of contrast? No. Is it going to work for you if you have deep skin? No. But if you have my skin tone and you love your cool tone grayish purples, this. This thing is what dreams are made of. I love every single look I do with this every single time. I've gone back to it. I've done, I think, 5 looks when I reviewed this with just this one little 5 pan, and it's €4 at the drugstore. I mean, just for that, it gets to be top 10 for it being this good. This is exactly what I want out of an eyeshadow palette. It's gray without it being too gray. It's got some lovely shades. Yes, the purple in the middle you have to build up, but I don't mind doing it with this if it's this cheap. And I just love the color story. I hope Catrice keeps doing these and they keep coming out with good color stories, because that would be lovely. So that's the eyeshadow palette ranking of all of the eyeshadow I tried so far in 2023 in terms of palettes. I've tried other eyeshadow for sure. But yeah, these are some lovely eyeshadow palettes, and I thought I could come on here to show you what's the cream of the crop. What are the things I'm really happy with? Of course, I have come into some other palettes as well in recent months, but those will just show up in the tier ranking of the eyeshadow palettes I've tried in the second half of the year, and then maybe I can do another roundup of everything in one video in January. Not sure yet. Do you want 2 new videos, or do you just want the one? Not sure. Let me know in a comment down below what you would like to see. I would love to know. For now, thumbs up this video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more by me. I come on here 4 times a week, so if you'd like to stay tuned for more, and then I hope to see you in my next video. Bye-bye!